What's up, Packer fans? Welcome back to another episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk about today's topic because I find it extremely interesting, and I'll be transparent up front. I don't have a perfect answer for you as we get into the question, and I'll just lay it out there for you. The question is going to be, what are the right expectations for Jordan Love this season? And you may have saw yesterday on Twitter, Dan Orlovsky had posted his quarterbacks who are under the most pressure in 2023. And he did it by NFC, AFC, and then I think he did an overall NFL one as well. But the quarterback that he put under the most pressure of any quarterback in the NFC was Jordan Love. And he was second in the NFL, according to Dan Orlovsky, to only Aaron Rodgers. So he said Aaron Rodgers had the most pressure of any quarterback, but he said that Jordan Love had more pressure than any NFC quarterback. We'll maybe discuss that in a little bit, but here were some of his reasons why. He is a first-round pick who hasn't really played yet. He already received a contract extension. He basically helped push a Hall of Fame quarterback out of town so that the Packers could move forward with Jordan Love. Said that he needs to prove that he can be the guy. And that, in his opinion, his expectation should be that Jordan Love doesn't skip a beat from what the Packers have been, and mentioned that the Packers have been in the NFC Championship game 2 of the last 3 years, and said he expects Jordan Love to play, quote, tremendous football. So that was Dan Orlovsky on Jordan Love and the pressure that he is under in 2023. Now, I would be a bit hypocritical if I said that this was totally foolhardy and completely crazy, because I had just done an episode recently of Packers that are on the hot seat this year. And on my list of Packers that are on the hot seat is Jordan Love. I think Dan Orlovsky and I have some similar common ground here on what we're sort of talking about. And where I'm coming across and why I put Jordan Love on the hot seat is that, simply put, if Jordan Love has a terrible season, Green Bay will start looking for his replacement next year. And there is, at least as of right now, on paper, set to be a tremendous quarterback class that is coming up in this next draft. So if Jordan Love goes out and just plays terribly, Green Bay is going to look at those quarterbacks. There's no two ways about it. Even if he plays like bad / just not up to expectations, Green Bay is going to have to look at those quarterbacks. So inherently, going into this season, there is pressure on Jordan Love. He is a little bit on the hot seat, at least when it comes to him having to play at a good enough level for him to show, hey, I can be the guy here and you can put your faith in me and you can put your trust in me. And I think it was semi-telling that Green Bay signed him to basically a 1-year extension, not having to have them do the 5th-year guarantee or anything like that, but basically just signing him to that 1-year extension. This was not a super long-term deal. This was, hey, let's give you the starting job this year. You're going to be on the roster in some capacity next year, but we're not committing to anything past that point. And I think, again, that is somewhat telling. However, I do think Dan and I are a little bit on different wavelengths here. I don't think Jordan is under the most pressure of any quarterback in the NFL. And the other thing that I will very clearly state here is I think Packer fans have a pretty good understanding of going into this season that nothing's probably going to be perfect for Jordan Love. There's going to be some ups and downs. I think most Packer fans expect that there's going to be some bumps in the road and that it's going to take time. Yes, this is his 4th year in the league, and these are very unique situations and unique circumstances. And Jordan's going to have some pressure because of all the things that Dan mentioned, that Aaron is gone and Jordan's the guy, and he's the starting quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. That is a big deal. Listen, as much as maybe nobody wants to put that pressure on him, this is going from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to now Jordan Love. It's up to Jordan to figure out where he fits in that next in line after Brett and Aaron. And the sky's the limit. He was a first-round pick for a reason. He's an incredibly talented thrower of the ball. He's an incredibly talented football player, but he has a lot to put together. And there's a very interesting roster and team that's around him as well. So yes, I do think that Jordan is on the hot seat in some capacity. And mostly just that if he completely craps the bed and does terrible, and I want to lay out here too, I do not expect that to happen. I don't expect Jordan to come out and play poorly at all. Nor I shouldn't have to say this, but nor do I want that to happen. As you know, I'm a Packer fan. Bart Starr's behind me. I would love for Jordan to go out and be the best quarterback in the NFL. That would give me great joy. But I do think it's at least within the realm of possibility that if Jordan does not play well and he really plays poorly, that yes, he's going to be on the hot seat. That just is what it is. And there is some level of pressure that comes with it. But as far as most pressure in the NFL, or at least in the NFC, second most pressure in the NFL, I don't see it that way. The pressure that's on Jordan is simply the pressure of being the starting quarterback in Green Bay. And yes, following a couple legends along with it. That's just part of the gig and part of the territory. I don't think there's any additional pressure on him based on the circumstances that are given. And I think if you even want to say, well, it's the Packers moved on from Aaron because Jordan was ready and he's ready to be the guy and the expectations are up here, I don't necessarily buy that either. I do think they moved on to Jordan because they want to see him play and see what he's capable of. But I think they wanted to move on from Aaron more due to the circumstances, the state of the team, the contract that Aaron was under, and wanting to see Jordan Love. It was all encompassing. It wasn't just, oh, Jordan's ready and we need to get this old guy out of town so that this guy can play right now because he's going to take us to the promised land sooner rather than later. I don't see it that way. I see it as it was everything involved in the process, from contract to probably Aaron needing a fresh start, Green Bay needing a fresh start, wanting to see what Jordan's capable of, and all of the above. I don't think it's just any one thing. So inherently there is pressure with being the Packers starting quarterback, and every quarterback, if they go out and they play poorly, is capable of being replaced at any time. That's most players at most positions in the NFL as a whole. So I don't necessarily agree with Dan Orlovsky that this is the super high pressure situation for Jordan Love and he has to feel like all of this burden on him. I just don't see it that way. I think the burden and the pressure is just simply being the starting quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. But yes, there is some level of pressure that is clearly there. But that, I think, brought me to my main question, and what I really wanted to discuss today is what should be the expectations for Jordan Love? Because I think that's really, really interesting, because I think this is really tough to pin down. Green Bay is the only franchise, basically, that has been in this situation anywhere near recently, where you go from a Hall of Fame quarterback, you draft his replacement in the first round, you wait 3 years, and then you give the reins over to the next guy. And that's from Brett to Aaron, and now Aaron to Jordan. It just doesn't happen that often, especially with a first round pick at quarterback. When you pick a guy in the first round, they're playing sooner rather than later. That has not happened with Jordan. And yes, we saw him start against the Chiefs. We saw him come in some garbage, not necessarily mop-up duty, but I guess more garbage mop-up duty against the Lions a couple of years ago. And then he came in with the injury to Aaron Rodgers last year against the Eagles. So we've seen Jordan a little bit. We've seen him in preseason, but he hasn't had the opportunity to really be the guy. The Chiefs game, he had some level of opportunity to prep for, but it was a really bad game plan going into the heart of Kansas City. Jordan wasn't quite ready yet. I don't think we can glean a ton from that. The Eagles certainly were not prepped for Jordan Love in their encounter with him, so we can't really glean a ton from that either. The defensive coordinators are going to now be game planning specifically for Jordan and trying to make sure that things are as complicated and complex and as nuanced as possible. Then he's going to have to read every single defense known to man. So we don't have a great regular season feel for what Jordan Love can be as a starter. So trying to put expectations together as to what a season should look like for Jordan is really hard to do. And there's just not a ton of precedence here. There's not only just first round quarterbacks, but there's not guys who sit for the first 3 years of their career and then take over as the clear starter in year 4. There's just not. So it's really tough to look back at the annals of NFL history and say, well, this has happened on these different occasions, and here's who did it the worst, here's the average, here's who did it the best. So we have to sort of think outside the box a little bit and put a few different things together. And that's what my goal is today, is to sort of look at some other quarterbacks in some different situations, try to see what a average season should look like for Jordan Love and where we can kind of set that bar. So the first thing, and the clearest expectation, or I guess the clearest, just apples to apples comparison, if you will, is Aaron Rodgers' first year as a starter. That's the closest we get. And it's really like the perfect scenario, right? You're taking over for a Hall of Famer. You sat your first few years. This is your first year as a dedicated starter. They traded away the Hall of Fame player so that you could start in the league. That's really the apples to apples, the true comparison that this is. The issue is that we now know that Aaron ended up becoming one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. So if that's the only player that we have to really compare him to, that makes things a little bit tougher because we ultimately know what Aaron became. But that being said, Aaron's first year as a starting quarterback, 341 completions, 536 attempts, 63.6 completion percentage, 4,038 yards, 28 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, had a couple hundred rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns as well as, on that season. But overall, 4,000 yards, 28 touchdowns, 13 picks on 64% basically completion percentage. That's a pretty darn good first season as a quarterback. So that's one bar that you could set is say, hey, somewhere around 63, 64%, around 4,000 yards. And then, basically a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio with Aaron having 28 touchdowns and 13 picks that season. So, all right, that's one way to look at it. How about Rodgers just this past season? Now, not a clear apples to apples comparison, right? Aaron is a 4-time MVP, a Hall of Famer. So to expect that Jordan can come in and just repeat what Aaron did from a season ago, on just thinking of that out loud, that seems like a pretty tall task, right? But you look at Aaron's numbers from last season in a 17-game schedule, 350 completions on 542 attempts, 64.6% completion percentage, 3,695 yards, 26 touchdowns, 12 picks, and a little under 100 yards rushing with a touchdown. That was his last year as a starter. That's not like a super hard like bar to clear. That's within the realm of possibility. Also, by the way, and I tweeted this out, talk about a crazy comparison. Rodgers' first year as a starter, 341 completions. His last year, 350 completions. His first year, 63.6%. Last year, 64.6%. His first year as a starter, 4,038 yards. Last year, 3,695 yards. His first year, 28 touchdowns. Last year, 26 touchdowns. His first year, 13 picks. Last year, 12 picks. Almost identical seasons from his first year as a starter to his last year as a starter in Green Bay. That was a fun little aside for you. Nothing really to do with today's topic, but interesting nonetheless. All right, let's get back to Jordan Love. So those were Aaron's bookend seasons as a starter for the Green Bay Packers. That first year, certainly interesting, and maybe the ultimate litmus test to really, I guess, test Jordan against. And then this past year, can he get to basically what Aaron was a season ago? And if Dan Orlovsky is right and that the expectation is that Jordan just come in and take over and pick up where Aaron left off, then around 64% completion percentage, 3,700 yards, 26-12 touchdown to interception ratio, that's what you're looking at. And if Jordan can, basically be what Aaron was a season ago, that's a really good, I think, first season. I think everyone would be pretty excited about that. So then I wanted to take a look at, all right, who are some of the top, not necessarily top quarterbacks a season ago, but what are those sort of thresholds? So I went by quarterback rating, which is not the perfect be-all, end-all rating, but I wanted to look at all right, what's the 10th best quarterback in the NFL? So by quarterback rating standards, with at least, I wanted to have at least a decent amount of starts. It was Trevor Lawrence was number 10. All right. So Trevor Lawrence completed 66% of his passes, 4,100 yards, 25 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. That's about the 10th best quarterback. So if Jordan Love throws for 4,000 yards and 66% completion percentage with a 25-8, basically a 3-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, that would put Jordan Love in the top 10, or at least in the conversation around there for quarterbacks in the league. That would be an extremely, extremely good season for Jordan Love. All right, let's talk about the 14th best, right around the middle. There wasn't a really other good comparison for players who played enough games and things like that, but Kirk Cousins right around the middle of quarterback. He was 14th, Cousins was. He had 66% of his completions, or 66% completion percentage, 4,547 yards, 29 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. So 2-to-1 touchdown to interception, 4,500 yards on 66% completion percentage. Technically 65.9. You get the point. So that would be around the 14th best quarterback. So those are pretty lofty expectations if you want to be a top half of the league quarterback. That's right around where Kirk Cousins was. All right, next up, the 22nd best quarterback. So if you want to be, maybe you're not the top 10, maybe you're not top 15, but you're at least not in the bottom third, at least not, I guess you're on the fringe there, but you don't want to be a bottom third quarterback. That was Derek Carr. Derek Carr still gets a massive free agent deal this offseason, still is thought of as a starting caliber quarterback in the league, clearly. Derek Carr, 22nd best quarterback rating for quarterbacks with enough starts, had 60.8% completion percentage, 3,500 yards, 24 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. So that's around where, if you want to be, right around the 20th to 22nd-ish best quarterback in the league, those are the numbers that you need to hit. I think that's a really good litmus test. I'll talk about that more in just a moment. How about Davis Mills? Davis Mills is one of the worst starting quarterbacks last year in the NFL. Here were his numbers. He had 61% completion percentage, 3,118 yards, 17 touchdowns, 15 picks. So if you're around those numbers, you're probably going to be one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. That's clearly where we don't want Jordan Love to be. Jordan Love will be going into his 4th season this year. And I thought one good quarterback to maybe take a look at who was also going into his 4th season was Daniel Jones. So Daniel Jones last year, when he went into his 4th season, had a full year as a starter. Now, he had started games previously, so it's not, again, apples to apples here. But Daniel Jones last season in his 4th year had 67% completion percentage, 3,200 yards, 15 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. A very bizarro stat line on that Giants team, but 3-1 touchdown interceptions, not a lot of touchdowns, only 5 picks, 67% of his completions is really, really freaking good. And then 3,200 yards. So I think people gained a level of respect for Daniel Jones last year, but that was his 4th season as a NFL player, which Jordan Love's going to his 4th season now. Again, clearly Daniel Jones had starts before that, but that's another interesting player to sort of compare to and say, all right, if Jordan Love can be as good as Daniel Jones was in his 4th season, that's where he would be around. How about Jalen Hurts? All right, Jalen Hurts is a player who was drafted in the same draft class as Jordan Love, obviously went after Jordan Love did. Jalen Hurts ended up with a really good season a year ago. But how about Hurts' first year as a starter? All right, which was not last year, but the previous season. But what did he look like in his first year as a full-time NFL starter? Well, completed 61.3% of his passes, 3,144 yards, 16 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. However, what's really difficult about Hurts as well is Hurts ran for almost 800 yards and 10 touchdowns as well. So you can't really compare apples to apples because Jordan's not going to be an 800-yard, 10-touchdown rusher. But how about you add those yards to the total yardage? So you had, 39-ish hundred total yards and 26 overall touchdowns if you include the rushing and the passing with 9 interceptions. He also had 9 fumbles. I think if you start getting somewhere around 3,600 yards and 26 touchdowns, only 9 interceptions, I think that's a pretty good litmus test as well for Jordan if he can be what Jalen Hurts was in Hurts' first year as a starter. And hopefully that is a precursor to what Hurts did in his next season and almost basically winning an MVP and a Super Bowl a season ago. So that's another really good litmus test for Jordan. How about another interesting one? That's Tony Romo. Tony Romo had a couple years to sit and wasn't the starter right away. Now, Romo clearly was not a first round pick for the Cowboys. He was an undrafted player, so it's not total apples to apples again. But how about Tony Romo's first 17 starts in the NFL? Romo had a 62.6% completion percentage, 4,276 yards, 29 touchdowns, but 19 interceptions. I think that is something that we could see closer to for a Jordan Love, where we get closer to maybe that 4,000 yards, maybe around 62% completion percentage only. We get a good amount of touchdowns, maybe 28, 29 touchdowns, but we also see an increased number of interceptions, maybe more in that 18-ish range. I think that's within the realm of possibility, but that's what Tony Romo did in his first 17 games as a starter. How about Jordan Love's last college season? I think that's another interesting way to look at this. Love in his last college season, now he didn't have a very good supporting cast, but had 62% completion percentage, 3,400 yards, 20 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. So not exactly what he's going to be doing in the NFL, not the same amount of games, but that's what he was at in his very last year in college. Now, the previous year to that, he was insane. He was awesome, but that last year, not quite as good. If I had to put numbers on this, just based on all these numbers that we went through, what Love did in college, what Rodgers did in his first year, what Rodgers did last year with the team that, Jordan Love is taking over to some extent, right? Obviously different receivers and those sort of things. You look at Tony Romo and some of these other quarterbacks that we mentioned, Jalen Hurts' first year as a starter. I think this is where I would say and sort of set that line for Jordan Love. 62% completion percentage, around 3,500 yards, and can you get to that 24 touchdown to 12 interception mark? If you can have a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, 3,500 yards, 62% completion percentage, I think that would be a really good start to the Jordan Love era. Which brings us back to where Aaron Rodgers was a season ago. So those expectations, again, I'll say them one more time, 62% completion percentage, 3,500 yards, 24 touchdowns, 12 picks. Rodgers last year, 64.6% completion percentage, so a couple percentage points higher than that 62. Rodgers had 3,695 yards. The expectation I put there for Love was 3,500 yards. Rodgers had 26 touchdowns. My expectation for Love was 24. And Rodgers had 12 picks. My expectation or goal for Love was 12. So Rodgers a little bit better completion percentage, a couple hundred more yards, 2 more touchdowns, same amount of interceptions. I think that's somewhere what you're looking at. And again, if I think Jordan has that sort of season this year, around 3,500 yards, 62% completion percentage, and a 24-12 touchdown to interception, I think that'd have to be deemed a pretty darn good success. And I think, again, that would put him right where Aaron Rodgers was a season ago. Now, record-wise, Rodgers was 6-10 in his first year as a starter. And very clearly, wins are not a quarterback stat. This takes the whole team. But Rodgers was 6-10 in his first year, and Rodgers and the Packers were 8-9 a season ago. And I think if we're being fair to Jordan, I think the Packers' expectation and Jordan's expectation is somewhere clearly in that range. Probably 6-10 at worst, you're hoping. I think there's a level that they can get to above 8-9. I think this team could be a playoff team if Jordan plays well. But I think that's probably the range, right? If you look at Aaron in his first year as a starter where he played well, you had some question marks about the supporting staff or supporting cast in his year. There's a lot of injuries that year, but 6-10 in his first season, 8-9 last year with a very similar team as to what Jordan will be taking over. I think somewhere in the range should be the expectation for Jordan Love there as well. That's why I want to go, over some of the nuances of how we should evaluate Jordan this upcoming season. The first thing is that the weapons around him are going to play a major part. And I think it's fair to maybe be slightly critical of where this roster is when Jordan takes over, especially at the weapon position. Like, yes, you have Aaron Jones. That's going to be a really good thing. You still have an A.J. Dillon. Christian Watson, I think everyone has super high hopes for, but you're going to have probably 6 wide receivers that are either rookies or second-year players for his 6 primary wide receivers. His top 2 tight ends are going to be rookies. And yes, you've got a Josiah DeGuara there, but Josiah DeGuara has played basically as many snaps in the NFL as like a normal second-year tight end. Tyler Davis, still very young and inexperienced. So you've got Jones, you've got an A.J. Dillon, you've got Josiah DeGuara, but everyone else is a rookie or second-year player. There's a lot of youth and inexperience on this offense surrounding Jordan Love, and that is going to create a very volatile environment for a first-time starting quarterback. So I think that is going to be something that needs to be taken into consideration as we evaluate Jordan Love this upcoming season. And quite frankly, is a reason why I don't think there's this huge expectation for Jordan, because I do think he has a very young supporting cast alongside of him. Another noteworthy thing here is that the NFC is not very good. So I think there maybe is some expectation that Jordan should be able to at least keep this team afloat and make it that they are competing for a playoff spot at the end of the season. Will they get in the playoffs? Probably not. Maybe not. Maybe they do. I don't know. Like, that's going to be the fun part of the season. But I think if Jordan plays well enough, the expectation should be that they're at least competing for a playoff spot. But I think the bigger thing here is that the goal should not be stats. The goal should not be the record. The goal should be improvement and consistent progress. That's what I want to see out of Jordan Love. And I know maybe that's, I don't know, a bit participation trophy for a 4th-year quarterback who is a former first-round pick. I think if there are those of you who want to say, hey, like, screw that, I want to see this guy play well. He's had 3 years to sit behind Aaron. He's had all this time. He was a first-round pick. Green Bay traded up for him. I want to see him go and ball out. I understand you. I get you. I really, really do. But this is a very nuanced situation. He has not had a ton of time to play in this league. And I do think that whether he's a first-year starter, and I remember he's still pretty young, younger than some of the quarterbacks in this last draft. So if he comes out and maybe has some struggles at the beginning of the season, but shows consistent progress and consistent improvement throughout the year, and we see real flashes of success at the end of the year, I think there's a lot to take away from that too. And I think the really big thing here is, can he show signs of improvement? Can he get better as the season goes along? If the answer is yes, I think there's a real opportunity for Jordan to be successful, regardless of record, regardless of box score. I think you want to see him improve consistently as the season goes along. So I think the other question then becomes is, what does Green Bay need to see out of Jordan Love? Because if they want to feel some level of confidence that he can be the guy moving forward, he's going to have to show them. He's going to have to show them command, control of the huddle, complete command of the playbook. He's going to have to show that he can show those signs of improvement throughout the season, that he can lift some of the players around him, that he goes out and has a pretty good season and keeps his Packers team afloat and gives them a puncher's chance at a playoff spot at the end of the season. Jordan can do those things. I think this is going to be viewed as a success, and Green Bay I don't think is going to be out there looking for his replacement this upcoming draft. If it's not those things, if he has a really tough season, then yeah, we could be talking about, you know, a rough season for Jordan, which maybe led to Green Bay bringing in some competition for him as soon as this next upcoming season. So is Jordan Love under pressure? Yes, absolutely. Every starting quarterback is, and certainly anytime you're filling in as the next in line following Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers is going to be a level of pressure. But what should those expectations be? Growth and improvement, some real highlight level flashes, and I think the big final one here is moments of real, true, sustained success. It's great to have flashes, it's great to have highlight level plays, but can he go a 2 or 3 game stretch where he looks like a real legitimate starting caliber, you know, top 20, top 15 NFL quarterback? If he can do that by the end of the year, I'm going to feel pretty positive about his outlook moving forward. I think Aaron Rodgers, you know, first year and last year give a pretty good litmus test for what you want Jordan to be. And the other one I'll say one more time is Derek Carr's season. All right. I want to go over Derek Carr's season one more time with you, because I think this is the ultimate Mendoza line for for Jordan Love and what to sort of get out of this upcoming season. So Derek Carr was the 22nd, you know, highest rated by actual quarterback rating, not ESPN's QBR, but by actual quarterback rating, right around the 22nd best quarterback, depending on which ones you want to eliminate for games played and things like that. But right around the 26th, you know, best quarterback. One more time for Carr, 305 out of 502, 60.8% completion percentage, 3,522 yards, 24 touchdowns, 14 picks. I think if he does better than that, if he can be, you know, basically then one of the top 20 quarterbacks in the league, wherever that may show up, I think you're in very good hands. I think that's a phenomenal start to Jordan Love's career. I think if it's on equal footing, same season Derek Carr had a season ago, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I think you're still uncertain at that point. And listen, I know Derek Carr just got a big contract again and is going to be a starter, but I think that's sort of the, okay, we've got a starting caliber quarterback, but can he still show signs of improvement and be better moving forward? And then lastly is, if he's worse than that line, if he's worse than the 60.8% completion percentage, 3,500 yards, 24 touchdowns, 14 picks, then I think those question marks start coming. So I think Derek Carr's season last year is that perfect Mendoza line, the perfect measuring stick for what you want Jordan to be. If it's above Derek Carr's season, probably good. If it's at, okay, let's wait and see. If it's below, all right, we've got some problems and we're going to have to really evaluate some things. That's where I would sort of put it. Last but not least, the biggest thing, the last thing I'll say is, I think we're going to know what Jordan is when we see it. I don't think we're going to have to dive too far into the analytics. I don't think we're going to have to dive into the box score all that much. We've seen Brett Favre, we've seen Aaron Rodgers, and this wasn't perfect from the get-go for those players either. It took some time, but I think we're going to know if Jordan has what it takes to be the future starting quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. I think it's so necessary for us to get the opportunity, and more importantly, the Packers to get the opportunity to see that, to see if he can be the guy. But I don't think it's, I think there should be grace, and I think there should be some understanding that it's not going to just happen like that and like overnight all of a sudden he's going to be amazing. But if he shows those signs of improvement, if he can show signs of sustained success and some really flash, highlight level worthy play, I think we're going to know it when we see it. And I don't think we're going to have to dive too far into all the other stuff. We're smart enough as Packer fans to recognize a really good quarterback when we see him at this point. And I think we're going to see just what Jordan's capable of. And if he can be the long-term starting quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, we'll get a much better feel for that as this season goes along. And I think that just is one of the huge key fun things that's going to make this season so desirable to watch as a Packer fan. That's going to do it for me today. Always appreciate you joining me. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.